Welcome to the Cyber Savvy Boardroom. Thanks for joining us today. Your hosts are myself, David Himovich, and Alicia Cade, both within Google Cloud's Office of the CISO. You can find and subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. So Alicia, today we have someone we both know very well, Andreas Wuchner. Andreas is a cyber and risk expert, a business owner, a board advisor, and an investor who has experience in operating within complex global business environments.
And let's not forget that Andreas has also been in the trenches as the CISO and played global leadership roles in cybersecurity functions in financial services, where actually our paths crossed. Andreas is also directly involved in the creation of the national FS-ISAC for Switzerland, together with the Swiss government and the Swiss Bankers Associations, with the goal to enhance the cybersecurity defense capabilities for the financial industry in Switzerland. Let's welcome Andreas.
Okay, Andreas, welcome to the Cyber Savvy Boardroom.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
So for our listeners' awareness, I wanted to mention that you, Alicia, and I actually have a history working together in a CISO function at a Swiss bank. I think it's been now about 7 or 8 years since we all were there together. And we spent a lot of time collaborating on transforming cybersecurity governance across the 3 lines of defense, which, by the way, we probably could do a whole nother podcast episode on that topic. But I remember during those discussions, we talked a lot about investment in ensuring that the cybersecurity program had enough resources behind that. And so I want to kind of start today's discussion by really focusing on kind of how boards approach cybersecurity investment and kind of get your thoughts around that. Is it primarily driven by compliance, or are there other factors out there as well, strategic business goals, for example, that have a more prominent role in thinking about cybersecurity investment for boards?
That's a very, very good question. And I think there is no one answer to that because the different industries have different maturity. But I think it's fair to say that most of the boards start with a kind of a compliance angle, right? What do I have to do? And to be on the safe side or to not to get in trouble. But some industries like the financial world, but also some others really shifting gears here. And they are looking already now beyond just ticking boxes. And they ask themselves, how does cyber resilience really fuel our business strategy, right? That's the kind of question they start to ask themselves. And so therefore, I think if you want to be maybe blunt, if you really take it this way, I think the more forward-thinking leaders, they realize that cyber is not just a shield or something you have to do, but it's all about trust and growth. And if you do it right, there's so much you can do with it. And it's not only a cost, it is a cost, and it is a compliance thing, but it is definitely something which you can and should focus on and go beyond just baseline compliance. True driver should be something like business value, risk appetite. And if you as a board can define that for yourself, the whole topic of cyber risk becomes a very different one. And the discussion with the people and also with the auditors and with other fellow board members will become a very different one. And that's what you see nowadays in more innovative, forward-thinking boards.
Andreas, life takes unexpected twists, and certainly 8 years ago, I never thought I would be recording a podcast with you. And the same is for cybersecurity. It takes unexpected twists, of course. And why CISOs devise cybersecurity plans to protect the organizations, how do you advise boards to understand what an effective or good enough cybersecurity program is for the organization, especially that we can have these unexpected twists coming our way? So what would you say are kind of key indicators that demonstrate mature, effective cybersecurity posture and programs? And of course, metrics are not everything. So any tips on governance and culture as well?
You know what? I think it's much easier, much simpler than that. I have this situation that I often get asked from board members about, hey, can you just help me to ask the right questions? Are we doing enough? What is good enough? And, most board members are really smart people, right? They are there for a reason. Either they have done something well, they are in the right family, they have really good experience, but normally they are really, really smart and clever people. And the whole topic of cyber for most of the people is more a personal one. Oh, my phone, my family. And for the corporate world, it's difficult, right? It's really difficult, and they struggle to see what good enough means. And, for me, good enough is just simply fit for purpose. That's it, right? So, but what is fit for purpose, right? Does it cover crown jewels? Does it stand up against real threats? Does it align with the risk appetite of the board? Not just the kind of fashionable things, AI or whatsoever, right? Is what is in the press, what the marketing departments are all about. So maturity shows more or less in three ways. Risk ownership, is that clear? You mentioned governance. So that means it starts top down. Is there some defined appetite? Are there people responsible for it? And you know it best, right? If you just ask, hey, who owns controls? You already, okay, yeah, we have controls, ownership. Then you know already a lot about the culture and the organization. Measurable controls, the second thing, right? What is it really? What do we have? Is it clear? Is it standardized? Is it repeatable? Is it hopefully automated? That gives you a very good insight about good enough. And last but not least, for me, it's really the ability to recover and adapt, which I normally look into to see, hey, can you, if something happens, react swiftly? Do the people, have you ever done as a board a tabletop exercise? Have you ever talked with the people on the ground? Do you know, if you don't have access to your email anymore, who to call and where to find things and what your role really is? So there's a handful of questions which you ask, or which you can ask, and then you know already, yep, they're in a good way, or is it just, kind of a poster boy and we have to do it, right? So that's pretty much for me to figure out if the cyber is part of the boardroom conversation in a practical way, in a good way, or is it just someone talking a little bit about IT? And so therefore, these are the things I would really watch out for.
Yeah, and perhaps it's also who to ask these questions, right? Because it's not always just CISO. This awareness of how I'm going to recover should be also within the business.
True, very true. The funny thing is, whenever I get asked from a board member about, hey, security, and I normally then try to talk with the CISO involved or the person in charge, right? It's not always a CISO. And it's really interesting when you hear comments like, oh, no, I'm not regularly on the board because they think we do a really great job and there is no risk for, because we are so good. There's a lot of ego involved, right? And so therefore, it's a very human thing.
Yeah, I like that kind of the focus on risk and resiliency. And Alicia, your kind of intersection there with the business, because Andreas, I wanted to pivot a bit and talk about cyber as a competitive differentiator for a company as well. And I think most boards know that cybersecurity is a necessary expense, but how do they strategically leverage those investments as a competitive differentiator, kind of a secret weapon to build a stronger brand, to attract new customers, maybe even create new revenue streams for their organizations?
We all three of us, we have a banking background, right? And if you see into the European banks, there you see a lot of banks marketing their cyber strengths and digital savvy client thing. So this story is out there, and they have recognized then that investment into kind of smart cyber turns what we originally thought about risk management into a brand promise, right? You can really address people who are technically savvy, the younger generations who are digitally native and all that stuff. They are open and reactive to things. And you see in the OT space, as operation technology, or also in the product space in general, that people care about what their data does, where it goes, and how safe. It's not about, oh, I'm safe from getting an electrical shock from it. No, it also keeps my data in a safe place. And I would say as soon as cyber security / risk and the whole innovation around it becomes part of the value proposition of an organization, everyone wins, right? And a lot of organizations are far away from that, in all honesty. But there are first ones which are getting it. And it's really nice to see also advertisements, TV spots, which are specifically leveraging these kind of things, right? Sure, if I'm selling pasta, there is nothing I can really do about, my cyber smart pasta. But, nowadays everything is digital and there are so many ways to do things. And so therefore, I think there's a huge space still to be discovered by the industry. And, I hope with the modern technologies and all the AI capabilities we have, that also these systems will foster that idea and will drive the old-fashioned marketing people and product people into more innovative, cyber-aware marketeers soon.
Yeah, I really like that. I think there's the reputational risk piece that's involved in it. And a board that demonstrates a commitment to security turns that, potential reputational risk into a brand asset then. And like to your point, having public statements, marketing materials, even how a company is perceived around hiring some of the best top tier cybersecurity talent for their organization, I think kind of all contribute to that brand.
Yep.
So following on this spaghetti noodle of brand and value.
I'm glad you brought it up.
I had to. I want to kind of dive a little deeper and talk about the value. And CISO functions historically and often as cost centers struggle to communicate the value of what they deliver. Of course, until something somewhere goes wrong and they're able to prove that wouldn't happen to us, which could be an optimistic assumption too. What do you find is most effective and works in communicating the value and effectiveness of cybersecurity investments, cybersecurity function to board of directors? And what resonates with financial and strategic objectives? Because there has to be obviously a link in here. So any tips on techniques, frameworks, tricks of the trade?
I'm so thankful that you didn't mention return on investment, because I'm a so not believer in return on security spending.
I remember that, Andreas.
I know. If you go back to where we started with boards, right? Boards are all about business risk, mostly reduction of them. It's about resiliency. Board members are tailored, educated to take a lot of decisions based on not always the deepest amount of knowledge, right? Because you can't know everything. So therefore, you have certain things which you get prepared, you take a look at it, you discuss it, you take a decision and move on. And cyber risk is the same, right? And what board members often do, and this is also triggered by audits, is benchmarking. They want to know, are we better than others? And that's why some of the big consulting firms of the world make a fortune just with benchmarking, right? So that means for us, as long as we stick to a framework, be it NIST, being it ISO, use things like the MITRE attack vectors, which allows us to benchmark and translate what we do in IT and security on a daily basis into business impact and make trend clear. Okay, we reduce here, we still have an exposure there. If someone tries this, that could happen to us. Or some competitor had just suffered from this. Oh yes, that could happen to us as well. This kind of transparency. If an organization has this capability in place, and all of us know that at the end comes back to a control framework, automatic measurement, attack simulation. And if you have that one and you get a pretty good feeling of your reality around your crown jewels, your most important business processes and business data points, then you're doing a really, really good job. And, if someone from the board comes and calls you, like being the CISO, and hey, can that happen to us as well? And you can say, yeah, possibility is somewhere about 30%, but we have other controls, then you do a really, really good job. When you need to say, medium, maybe, that's what makes a board unhappy, right? Because it's not quantifiable and all that stuff. So return on investment for me is really all about risk reduction and resilience capabilities. And that's what, if we do a good job in cybersecurity, if we address these things, we do a good job.
Yeah, and I think also the way we communicate those things is putting ourselves in the board members' shoes, right? And really thinking, what perspective are they taking? They're not coming at it from technology side, they're coming at it from business and strategy and financial risk as well.
Yeah, I agree.
You mentioned those frameworks, and both within NIST and in ISO, some of those best practices highlight the need for threat detection and incident response. And I think a lot of board members are looking to some of the headlines to see what's out there, what's happening, comparing themselves against other organizations. How much should boards really focus on the threat landscape right now and thinking of things like, advanced ransomware attacks? How are boards using that information, and how much of that information should they be getting from their security teams when they're trying to formulate their strategy around cyber investment?
You drive a car. Do you need to know every little thing which goes wrong on the cars of your manufacturer and all that stuff? No, you don't, right? There's so much noise out there, and a good security program takes this all into account. And if you are a trusted advisor to the board or a trusted security person to the board, they know how to find you when they are in doubt. But if you are in doubt and you start crying, they know you wouldn't come crying if it's not urgent. Right? We talked about trust at the beginning. And if we know from bottom up on technology, threat intelligence side, and we have a dashboard or something which tells us, look, that's what it is. Here are the control maturity, the control weaknesses. Here are the different attack scenarios. We know what happens to others. And if you can make this transparent, the board will be really, really happy. But they don't know, and most of them are not really interested in all the details. You always have one or two members which are really tech savvy. But in my experience, at least 80% of the board members are not. And that's why I always say, when I hear people saying, oh, I'm a CISO and I want to be on the board, I say, no, don't do that. You cannot add value. Most of the time you sit there and just warm up the room, because the stuff they're talking about, you will have no clue about, and vice versa, right? So therefore, be there, be a trusted source, be a trusted partner, and they will understand when you ask for something that it's urgent. Otherwise, you would manage it in your normal line of thought and normal line of business. And that's the kind of approach for me which makes most sense.
Any thoughts or best practices that you've come across in how to successfully build that trust? Because I know a lot of CISOs will go into the boardroom maybe once a year and talk about their cybersecurity program. But what are the tools that could potentially be used to build trust between those meetings even?
Board people are used to trust because they depend on that, right? Board is a lot of human. And it's like the baby who always cries, or the person who always yells, the person who always lies will never be trusted again, right?
Mm-hmm.
And every board is different. But if you have and represent certain values and you're consistent and you have the integrity to say, look, that's what it is. And that doesn't mean to say yes to everything, right? Because often board members are challenging you just to see the reactions, not because they don't believe you. They just want to see, is that real coming from you, or is this something which an AI agent told you, or which that kind of stuff. It's a lot of human flavors, human interaction, and all that stuff. So, whenever I talk with CISOs about, first board meeting, or general, if I go to a board meeting, I always tell them something about human stuff, right? Never run into a board meeting. You know how boards work. Most of the time, they are not on time. They tell you your slot will be somewhere between 10 and 12 in the morning. And then the assistant calls you, you are up. And then you are 3 floors away. You run up there you are completely sweaty, you are completely out of breath, and then you stumble into the boardroom and say,
Right.
have your routines, never do that. Get your routines, whatever it is, get your shirt, skirt, whatever in order, get yourself just these human things. What you would do when you meet the parents of your partner for the first time, right? You only have one chance for first impression. This needs to be good. And every impression when you enter a boardroom needs to be the best of you. And, whatever, all the knowledge you have, the people have, it's the human things, the social things, which they fail often on. And, not being dressed correctly, not being articulated in a good way. That's the stuff which hurts most of the time. Or talking over someone, that kind of stuff. These are far more important than most people think. And, Alicia, you remember this about practicing to learn in front of a mirror to say no to yourself. It sounds completely stupid. It's completely idiotic. Try it. Get in front of the mirror and say really nice and concise no to yourself. And then you see how difficult it is. And if you practice this, if you're mastering these kind of things, you will see the board members will trust you.
Yeah, and always be ready for actually not having 20 minutes designated to your time slot. That 20 minutes can become 10 or 5 even.
Yeah.
So
20 slides, maybe only one or two, right? Which you get.
Rely on slides. Have the key messages and be ready for a conversation. That's the most important.
Totally true.
That's the most important. And Andreas, you mentioned AI. You mentioned fashionable objects as well at the beginning of our conversation here. So where would we be now without mentioning AI, actually, and talking about AI? So I have a question for you, because AI is often considered to be a double-edged sword by many. On one hand, a threat, and of course, opportunity. And for some, a huge threat as well. In your roles as a board member and advisor, what do you think boards should be razor focused on, not to lose the sight of the opportunities and not to put organizations at risk from cybersecurity perspective in this age of AI?
I think if you ignore AI today, you will be most probably out tomorrow, or maybe not tomorrow, but the day after. Again, now to go back to my pasta example, right? There it may be a little different in the pasta world. It may be about go-to-market and things like that. But you may, or our audience may have seen it then. I published something on LinkedIn just a couple of days ago, where if you're not aware, if you're not clear what your AI strategy is, and it's not about the tools, it's not about the technology itself, but where you can add value, where you can save costs, where you can gain efficiency, where you get unexpected risks on top, right, which you may not be fully aware of, the technology will get you. Being used against you or being just outperformed by others, being faster in adapting, smarter in using, and things like that. So to just say, oh, AI is not for me, nothing will happen to me, is just ignorance. And I don't think that you will find a lot of board members these days anymore who are saying, oh, we don't need that. It's more the other way around, that they have these wild dreams about, oh, can we reduce our workforce by 40%? Or can we get faster? No. And everyone below them say, how do we handle that one? So I think we're going through a phase right now of realization and benchmarking again, what makes sense, what doesn't. There are really good studies out there. Top universities have done research, where to go, where to start, where to watch, or what to watch out for, and things like that. But ignoring it is definitely expensive on one side and super dangerous on the other.
All right, Andreas, we are almost at time, but I want to give you the drop the mic moment to answer our last question, which we ask every guest. What is one action that you would recommend for our boardroom listeners today based on this discussion?
I learned that really the hard way, because when I started all that a couple of years ago, I thought it's so clear for everyone, but it's definitely not. Cyber risk is just a major business risk than any other risk. And, in the old days, we had cyber risks under IT risk, under operational risk, somewhere in enterprise risk, right? That's not good enough anymore. Nowadays, cyber risk is one major business risk. And as a board member, you need to demand clarity, accountability, and regular updates from your people. And if you do this, then you do your job properly. And it's something which is repeatable and should come again. Cyber doesn't need to be on every board agenda, right? But it should be an agenda item which can always be pulled. It should be at least once or twice a year, sure. But if you have 12, some have even more board meetings, right? Or boards per year. So it doesn't need to be on all of them, but it needs to be a regular one, and it needs to be clear who champions it. You have nowadays regulations like DORA or NIS2, which demands that someone from the board knows or can spell cybersecurity. Again, you don't need to be the expert, but make it clear that this is a major business risk, which regular gets looked at with the normal behavior, like with any other risk. And then if you do this, you're in a good spot. And if you're not sure, then you go out and reach out to people like you guys, like me. We can help there, right? And then without being actively involved, but helping from the background, and then you do your job the right way.
Great advice, and maybe bringing it full circle. I'm very happy that we are continuing a discussion that we have started 7 or 8 years ago now, and I'm very excited to see where the conversation goes next. But Andreas, thank you for joining us today in the Cyber Savvy Boardroom.
Thank you, Andreas.
Thank you.